Welcome to Leadership Live. I'm Daphna and this is a podcast for leaders like you who want practical tips to apply in leading your business, your people, and yourself. Now, I know that leadership is a skill that can be learned, and this podcast is about doing just that. Every week, I'll talk about what really works. You'll learn to shift your mindset and practice from being good at what you do to getting great at leading people who are good at what they do so that you can get the business results that you want. Whether you're a first-time manager, entrepreneur, or seasoned executive, you're at the right place. This podcast takes you from talented expert to extraordinary leader. So get ready to master your mindset, inspire your team, and elevate your business. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wonderful to be here again on Leadership Live. And today's topic is leading into the future. So I want to share a little bit of my journey with the podcast because it's been a huge learning for me. It's been absolutely navigating a territory that is completely new, that I knew nothing about before, except for the fact that I love listening to podcasts. And I wanted to make that transition or conversion from listener to podcast host, and I managed to do that. So this journey has been really full of learning. As I said, navigating a completely new territory, and I had a wonderful team to help me along. So I'm actually going to give a shout out here to my wonderful Liska, who's always amazing and helps me to stay on my toes and get things going. Annie, who's a wonderful manager in terms of my podcast management, and Andy, the wonderful sound engineer who just does an awesome job. So thanks to you guys, we've been able to navigate it and get to the side of the launch. And what I want to share with you today is that actually, for me, this launch it happened before I was ready. It kind of just, all of a sudden, my podcast was live and I had all these big plans to create a whole launch and a build up and have a website page ready and a whole lot of stuff in place. And just almost overnight, this thing was live and I wanted to do something with it while it was live, but I hadn't. It kind of caught me by surprise. I wasn't ready for it yet. So what happened, and I think we all have this experience of sometimes something just happening, maybe before you're ready, before you fully planned, before you actually have all your elements in place as you'd want them. And there's a whole lot of scrambling and frustration and wanting to get things going. And I have to say that my biggest learning from this was to actually just let go. Understand that this has happened. And I reached out to a really good friend of mine and she said to me, you know what? Perhaps there was divine providence here in terms of your message just had to get out there. So it was out there and then you had to follow along. And there was a big element of just letting go. Understanding that maybe it didn't happen according to plan, but it's happened. So let's run with it and let's flow with it and make this thing happen. And of course we did, and we got everything up and going and it's live. And I think for me, there was a beautiful analogy here or metaphor with what's happening for us right now in terms of the coronavirus pandemic. Because I think before we had this whole COVID situation, we all had our plans. We knew what we needed to do. We kind of had some idea of where we were going, what our plans were, how we wanted things to look, and we were working towards those. And then this virus came and turned our world absolutely upside down. We didn't really know what we were dealing with, completely new territory. And we were left with this question of what's going to happen and how do we manage it? And I think a big part of our learning has been how to kind of surrender the stuff that we don't know, let go of what we don't know, and work with what we have so that we can create the best of the situation. And this is really what I want to talk about today. It's how do we lead into this future where we're still very much in the throes of the pandemic and the uncertainty and the change, and how do we lead through this? How do we do this? What do you think are the qualities or the elements that are present in our reality, in our situation right now, that are really going to call to us to be the best leaders that we can be? What have we got in today's situation that is requiring leadership to step up in a certain way? And that's really what I'm going to be talking about. So going back to the corona pandemic and how it's caught us by surprise, and how now as leaders we've really needed to step up to say, how do we handle this? How do we lead our people, our businesses, our communities, our families? What do we do as leaders? And something I want to highlight here, something I haven't yet spoken about on any of the episodes of Leadership Live, is that we actually have been going through the change curve in a very real way. And it's been taking some time. And I think everybody is in a different place on this change curve as well. So for those of you who know the change curve, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, it's the different stages that we go through when we experience crisis or change. And the first stage is the stage of denial, which I can say I was totally in it in the beginning. When we heard about this virus and it was coming up, I was going, oh no, it's another flu virus. It's going to go. Don't worry. Let's carry on. Business as usual. Then you go into the mode of resistance. This can't be happening to me. Why is it happening? How can I change it? I don't want this to happen. And a lot of us have experienced this on some level. So part of it is carrying on as normal. Part of it is realizing you can't carry on as normal. So how do we fight it? Let's fight the regulations. Let's fight the restrictions. Part of it is saying, well, let's just put our heads down and do what we need to do. But we don't really want to accept that this is our life. Whatever form resistance takes, it's part of the development of our dealing with change. The third stage is exploration. So now once you've been through denial and resistance, you start to understand, okay, hold on a sec, this thing is here to stay. How do I understand it better? What do I need to know? How do I find out more information? And I think sometimes that element of looking for every new piece of information, how many cases have been identified, how many cases are seriously ill, how many people have died, all of those, following the stats and really wanting to know every single thing. And do we build antibodies or do we not build antibodies? And all those very specific questions that people really want to know and are questioning all the time. We want information. We want to start the exploration phase so that we can understand it, because when we understand it, then we'll know how to deal with it. And then we move into the fourth phase, which is the phase of acceptance and commitment. Once we've dealt with the struggle, the denial and resistance, we've gone through the exploration of really trying to understand and gather as much information as we can, we then move into that stage of, okay, I accept that it's here. I understand we're dealing with something that is going to be here for a while. What do I do with it? And committing to moving forward and seeing what we can do. Some of us may still be in the denial phase. Who knows? Some of us may have moved into acceptance way more quickly than others. Everybody at their own pace, and that's okay. But sometimes recognizing where you are on this change curve also helps you to understand your level of responses, your emotions, your level of stress, and your behaviors and actions, how you're dealing with it. Okay, so now if we've talked about the change curve, I really want to move into, if we understand that this is the process that we go through when we deal with any change, and certainly the pandemic that we're going through at the moment is something that is quite an extreme form of change, then what does it mean to be leading into the future? What does it mean to show leadership at this time, and how do we do this? So here are three elements that I've observed really that have come up through my conversation with clients and businesses and people that I work with. And those are the three elements I want to touch on today, because I think they're really important if we want to set our sights into the future and really know how we lead through that. And the first one is something that I think we all know about and have experienced, which is the very quick move into a virtual world. We are now not just leading in our regular world, we are leading in a virtual world. Everything has gone online so quickly and efficiently even. Yeah, maybe some glitches, but generally very, very efficiently. We've been able to do this, and now we need to know how we lead in this world. So in the beginning, we put in all sorts of stopgap measures and said, okay, let's do connection sessions over Zoom and make sure that I'm speaking to my team, every member of my team individually. You know, if I'm a manager or a business owner, really connecting with people and embracing this whole virtual world. But now we realize that this is something that's here to stay. So we need to really make it part of our world. It's not something that we need to do as a stopgap measure. It's something that we need to integrate into our life and make sure that we are using the online space and technology in the best possible way so that we can lead the way that we want to lead. And we really need to think creatively about how we're going to do this, how we are going to make online part of our regular day-to-day routine. Now, I know I've spoken about this before, that being online can also create a whole lot of fatigue, exhaustion, burnout, because we're constantly sitting in front of a screen. So we need to now understand how we pace ourselves around this virtual world, because it's important to have connection. It's important to be also off the online world. So how do we use it to the best of our ability so that we really get everything that we need? So combining the ability and the positive aspects of being online with really managing ourselves, managing our time, creating the boundaries, and making sure that we're using the virtual world that we're leading in to the best of our ability. So that's the first element. The second element that I'm noticing is that there is an increased need for focus on relationships. And what I mean by that is, of course, the whole challenge of connecting on a virtual world is something that's come up very, very strongly. But even more than that, we need to be showing a lot more empathy. We need to be building relationships in a very different way. And we need to increase the sense of collaboration. We really need to understand that we're in this together. And for me, this is a topic that I'm absolutely passionate about, because often when we think about leadership, we think about the person at the top who leads the way, shows the way, tells the way. And actually, I think this model has completely changed. I think now we need to look at some sort of collaborative model where it's not one leader or a few top leaders who lead the way, but actually that we're all so in this together and we all have responsibility in terms of our areas of leadership. And how do we do this together? Not to look up to our leaders to take us out of the situation, to lead our business out of it, to make sure that we still have jobs or to make sure that our business still survives. It's actually how do we all take part in creating the new version of whatever it is that we're doing and what it will look like into the future, and that we all have a responsibility in it. If I take Corona as an example, which is just such a good one, I think that on one level, we've seen a lot of rules and regulations and restrictions in terms of how we need to measure this or manage this. And my view is that there's an element that's missing in this model, and that's the element of responsibility. And I know that we're each showing personal responsibility in terms of how we're taking this on, and obviously some to a greater extent than others. But I also see that our leaders haven't really encouraged us in that way. They haven't enough really put the ball in our court and said, you know what, this is the situation. How do we lead through this together? How do we every single person in the world take personal responsibility in terms of really managing the situation and making sure that we are looking after ourselves, considering the social impact of our behaviors. I know there's been talk about it, but I just feel not enough actually trusting and handing over some of that responsibility. And I can just imagine there are going to be so many people who disagree with me on that in terms of the people who don't follow the rules or, disregard blatantly the laws. However, I do believe that when you hand over responsibility to people to do the right thing, the vast majority of people want to do the right thing. They want to look after themselves, their families, and their community. And I just feel that there's been too much of give the power to us, hand it over to us, we'll tell you what to do, and then we'll just do it. And I just don't think that's a good enough model of leadership for today. I think we have to move into this model of leadership that is in everybody's hands. We're all in this together. So this is really looking at that collaborative leadership, relationships, building relationships, looking at how to do this differently. We now have to build trust and rapport in a very different way, whether it's with our clients, whether it's with our staff, families and communities, because we're not able to see them and share that physical space. Regular water cooler meetings, popping into each other's offices meant that we could easily build relationships, trust and rapport with people. And now that's going to require more effort, more conscious effort. And that's part of this second element of the collaborative leadership focusing on relationships. The third element that I've noticed is really that there's an increased focus on what's really important to people. And really, when you deal with high level of change all the time, people tend to go back into their core places of safety to look for what's really important. And certainly I'm noticing that a lot of the conversations I'm having are around connecting back to purpose, understanding, are we in the right place from a career or business point of view? Is this where I really want to be? Am I in the right place from a geographical location point of view, something interesting that I've noticed is, when I work with expats in different countries, a lot of them are reconsidering, do they still want to be where they are, or do they want to move back home? Because in this time of change, somehow the appeal of going back home feels safer, feels more steady, solid, or whatever. There's some connection there that is really coming back to understanding what's important. I see a lot of emphasis on spending more family time, people being very conscious of, am I spending enough time with the family? Am I spending quality time with my children? So that's something I noticed, the really going back to what feels safe, what feels more connected to myself, what's really important. Because when we feel so unsteady in our external environment, we really want to go back inside and connect with ourselves and what's important and make sure that that happens around us. And I've certainly seen, things like businesses that were so reliant on travel around the world. So business people constantly traveling are now spending more time at home and really valuing that. Salespeople who are so used to doing their sales calls face-to-face. Zoom has been a really difficult transition for these people, are now starting to entertain the idea of, oh, wow, okay, maybe I can do a Zoom call. And what does that mean to me and my quality of life, and how can I make it better? People who work in sensitive fields like the medical fields or financial fields are also making this transition of, can we have confidential conversations over this virtual platform? So looking at what's really important in that and how you can create that level of importance and meaning even when our environment has changed so much around us. So I think when we look at leading into the future, we really understand that the context that we have here is really one of uncertainty and change. I think this is a time that we've really never felt so lacking in answers. There's still so much information about the virus itself that we don't know. There's a lot that we know and a lot that we've learned over the time, but there's still a lot that we don't know. We don't have the answers to many, many questions that people are holding in their head. Will they find a vaccine? How long will it take? Will we ever come back to normal? I think we've kind of answered that there isn't a new normal. There isn't a day after. This is the reality. This is the future. When I talk about leading into the future, it's leading now, actually, because this is going to be our reality for a while. I suppose that's something that we're all getting our heads around. And since we don't have all the answers, this is like a true leadership challenge, because for years in leadership development and leadership experts have been saying leaders don't have to have all the answers. And now we're really being tested on it because we don't have the answers. We know that. We know that we know very little about what's going on. So how do we still lead? How do we still help people to come along with us and create the future that we want to create? And of course, it's possible, and really is about now, as I said, stepping back, bringing in that model of collaborative leadership, leading with others and building those relationships, embracing the virtual world in a way that's going to help you maintain balance and really achieve what you want to achieve, and then really focusing on what's important in this period of absolute change and complexity and ambiguity. We just don't know what's going to happen next. So I really want to leave you with a thought of, for me, my view is that the tool of leadership is conversation. And if we look at all these elements that have come in that are now kind of shaking up a little bit our future, that we just don't know what's going to happen next, and yet we know we need to step up to leadership, how are you going to use the tool of leadership, which is conversation, to move you forward into the future that you want to create? Think about that and think about the elements that I've discussed. And really just let's all look forward to creating the future now. I think this is what we want to do. We want to be able to step into it now, embrace everything that's going on around us, and really just take it step by step. We don't have the answers. It's going to be messy. It's going to be messy. Use the people around you and ask yourself, how can you use conversation, communication to lead you, your team, your family, your community in this time of uncertainty and complexity? And that's my message for you today. So thanks, as always, for joining me. Let me know, what insight are you taking away from today's conversation? I would really love to hear that. What resonated for you? What got you thinking? What do you agree with and what do you disagree with? And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe and stay sane. And this wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. You can head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download many resources, including a chapter of my book that will show you how to get through tough times and define a big vision for your leadership and your business. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, and I'd be even more grateful if you'd share it with a friend, leave a review and a 5-star rating so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. Tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.